Hi, my name is Joey Cruz. I'm a program manager in the identity engineering team, and I'm a part of the customer experience team. And in today's session, we'll be covering Azure AD as a new security control plane. All right, let's get started. And really, to get started, we should understand what I mean by security control plane. What used to be just your enterprise users have turned into your partners, customers, and BYOD devices are now accessing your corporate data. And what that means is understanding that the old wall garden approach, where you were able to control your network, has changed. And you're in a perimeterless state where your users are accessing applications that you have no control over, but you can integrate those applications with Azure AD and apply controls. That's something we'll be covering specifically on what you can do from an organization perspective to secure those specific applications. Understanding how Azure AD can help you apply the principles of zero trust is really what we're going to talk about in this session. Is verifying explicitly, understanding how you can apply least privileged access. So understanding what you can do to ensure that users have the correct roles, but the permissions are only there when they actually need them, and assuming breach. These core principles are going to be how we're going to be covering this specific session and understanding how we could use these to ensure that our enterprise is moving towards a zero trust model. And in this section, we're going to be covering identities. And identities is really attributes based on a specific user. This could be specific group role memberships or understanding where the user comes from a location perspective. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do from an Azure AD perspective and understanding the user session and user risk and what that means for your enterprise.
To get to identity protection, scroll down to security. And underneath protect, you'll see identity protection. Inside the overview blade, we give you a quick snapshot of the last 30 days of the risky users that we had detected and the risky sign-ins. You'll notice that there's a gray and blue bar. The gray bar is the protected risky sign-ins that have a sign-in risk policy assigned to those users. But if the user doesn't have a sign-in risk policy, we classify them as unprotected. We also highlight legacy authentication inside your enterprise and your identity secure score. Inside of identity protection, there's different detection types. An example would be unfamiliar sign-in properties. When you sync an identity to Azure AD, identity protection uses machine learning to understand where a user typically signs in from. So if a user comes in from a specific location and starts coming in from a different location, we're able to tell you that this doesn't seem like a normal behavior for this user. That's a sign-in risk. We also have user risks. So if the user has been marked with leaked credentials, meaning that we see the user's username and password on the dark web, we mark the user with leaked credentials. This gives the IT admins the ability to configure policies to help us understand using machine learning that this user has remediated the risk. An example would be if a user has leaked credentials and a user hits a user risk policy to require password change, the risk will be remediated. This can also be applied to sign-in risk. So if a user is coming in from a Tor browser and they hit a sign-in risk of medium, you can apply them to satisfy MFA before they get access. You could also leverage the sign-in risk with conditional access. Inside of conditional access, you can create a specific policy for the user that does not allow them to access an application if they're coming in from a high risk. You can do that by configuring sign-in risk. This sign-in risk actually comes from identity protection. So if you don't want a sensitive application to be accessed from an anonymous browser, like a Tor browser, you can actually block specific applications for specific users with conditional access. Let's go ahead and take a look from an end user perspective. If Bob tries to access Office through a Tor browser, Bob's presented with suspicious activity has been detected. And if Bob clicks verify, Bob's then requested to verify with MFA. A notification has been sent to Bob. If Bob approves, Bob's not only remediating a sign-in risk that Bob posed in identity protection by satisfying MFA, Bob also gets access to the resource. So one of the specific policies that we configured was blocking AWS if a user is coming in from a medium or high risk session. Since Bob is using a Tor browser to access a sensitive application, Bob's not going to be allowed to access the application and will be presented with the following notice. Notice Bob is blocked because of a sign-in risk. This is because the admin had configured conditional access to weigh in and evaluate this sign-in risk in real time before the user got access to the resource.
All right, what we covered was identity protection and how when your organization syncs to Azure AD, we're able to use machine learning to understand when your user is posing a risk, either a sign-in risk or a actual user risk. Not only that, but you have the ability to remediate. And this could be either done through MFA, prompting the user for MFA, blocking access, or resetting passwords. Not only that, you can also take advantage of if a user resets their passwords, they have to provide a strong password. What we do to enable enterprises with blocking weak passwords is password protection. So if you look at password protection, you have the ability to create a custom banned password list. On top of a custom banned password list, you have the globally banned password list. So this is a Microsoft defined password list that we have that blocks the well-known password patterns that most end users use, because we don't want our end users to remediate and provide weak passwords. And at the end of the day, there's only a certain type of people that like passwords. That's because they're easy to guess, easiest way to get into an enterprise. So there has to be a better way. What can we offer our end users that is more secure, but also more convenient than just passwords? This is where FIDO2 and security keys come into play, where you're able to offer your end users passwordless options like Windows Hello for Business, Authenticator app, or FIDO2. Let's take a look at how these technologies actually work. With Windows Hello for Business, your end user can go up to a device and provide their username and password to register for Windows Hello for Business. When the user does this, they have to provide MFA. What this enrollment process does, it creates a private key protected by the TPM. So when a user goes up to the device and unlocks the device, they actually authenticate against Azure AD. And when the user does this, they get single sign-on to not only Microsoft resources, but any of the SaaS applications that you've integrated with Azure AD, to include on-prem and web apps. So what it would look like would be your end users go up to a device, a Windows 10 device, unlock the device, providing their face or biometric if the device supports it. If the device doesn't support it, then they have the option of enrolling a PIN. But the end user ends up getting strong authentication. So instead of being prompted for MFA with conditional access, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, they get single sign-on across the board. So they don't even get the MFA prompt. What about those users that aren't running Windows? You can offer them passwordless experience like phone sign-in. With phone sign-in, you have the ability to access the resource, but instead of providing username and password, you provide username and you're prompted for a 2-digit code. When the user's prompted for the 2-digit code, they have to provide either biometric, so like Face ID or Touch ID, and if the device doesn't support that, they can provide a PIN. This gives the end user is the ability to access the resource without ever providing a password. So again, we're trying to strike that balance between security and usability. So let's take a look at how Passwordless with the Authenticator app works. If an end user goes up to office.com and provides their username, instead of being prompted for their password, they get prompted for a 2-digit code. Now, the end user has to do is match the 2-digit code, which prevents users from just clicking approve without understanding what they're actually approving. Not only that, I also had to provide biometrics like Face ID or Touch ID to approve that request. But now Lisa has the ability to go through Office without being prompted for a password. Now let's take a look at how FIDO2 works with a hybrid Azure AD join device. A user can insert their security key and unlock the device. Let's go ahead and check the type of join that this specific device is. So in this case, we're looking at a hybrid Azure AD join device. Not only was the user able to unlock the device with the security key, but the user has a Kerberos ticket issue. The user also has the ability to get single sign-on to office.com. but not only Office.com, also on-prem resources, like a network drive. Now let's cover devices. Understanding what we can do about identities with identity protection is one layer of protection, but really where that user is accessing your data and what we can do to make sure that the user's device is actually healthy is what we'll cover next. So understanding the difference between a managed device or a BYOD device and its health and compliance policies that you can apply to it, understanding specific device risks that the device can give you, so the signals, and then understanding what you can do from a protection level. And really, to understand how you can secure devices is first understanding how devices are treated inside of Azure AD. There's 3 different device type joins: hybrid Azure AD join, so a device that has line of sight to your Active Directory, and it's also being synced to Azure AD. The other type would be if the user has no line of sight to your AD, they can join it directly to Azure AD. Or if it's the user's BYOD device, they can do Azure AD register. One of the advantages of joining devices to Azure AD is that it gives your end users the ability to get single sign-on to cloud resources, those resources that you integrate in Azure AD, but also your on-prem resources. Understanding how to establish trust in the devices can vary, depending on if it's a corporate-owned device where you can enroll it into Intune, and Intune can stamp the device as compliant is a form of trust. Or if the device has line of sight to your domain controllers, it's also trusted by virtue of the domain join. But if a device is a BYOD device, you have the options of applying MDM or MAN policies for those BYOD devices. So mobile device management or mobile application management. That way you have a signal to make sure that you understand if the device is compliant or if the user can access that application. And we're going to go ahead and take an example of how you can weigh in conditional access policies by weighing in not only the user risk, but also the device risk. Users start with a risk state of low. What this means is typically we start understanding. So in this case, we have an application admin and is grouped into London users. We typically understand this specific use case where we're starting to learn this user's behavior. So if the user starts signing in from different locations, let's say the user starts signing in from Asia. One of the things that we do with the machine learning is we call it out as an unfamiliar sign-in property. We've never seen this user signing from this specific location. Other things that we can take into account is exactly what we covered in the identity protection section. If we see this user's username and password leaked in the dark web, the user risk gets bumped up to high. What this does, it gives you, as the IT admins, the ability to either block or reset that user's password or prompt that user for MFA. For leaked credentials, definitely reset the user's password to remediate that risk. If we look at device risks, understanding not just the device type, so Windows 10 device, or the device join, like Azure AD join, but applying endpoint detection and response, so Microsoft Defender ATP, can give you a signal to understand what type of risk this device poses. An example would be if malicious activity is detected on the device risk is bumped up to medium. And if the device doesn't satisfy the compliance, so Intune MDM can actually read the signal of Microsoft Defender ATP to tell you if a device is compliant or non-compliant. So if a device does have malicious activity in it, Intune can mark the device as non-compliant. And you as an IT admin can actually block based off of that. So you could either block based off device compliance from Intune, and then from user risk, you can also apply limit specific access, but you can weigh all this in different ways because they're all the signals that Azure AD can weigh in.
Now that we explained how you could leverage Intune and Microsoft Defender ATP to feed a device compliance and apply it to a conditional access policy to protect an application, let's take a look at what a policy looks like. Here we have a policy defined where we have specific applications, in this case Salesforce instance, different types of Salesforce instance. And we're going to have one grant control, which is to require compliance. If we look at Bob's device, Bob is actually coming from Woodgrove VM1, which is non-compliant. And the reason why it's non-compliant is because Bob's VM actually poses a high risk level. This is how Microsoft Defender ATP and Intune compliance can help you leverage a device risk state to ensure that users coming from a high-risk device don't have access. If we look at why the device is actually high, It's because there's been malicious tools that have been downloaded and definitely different things that should have not happened on the device. This is why the device is marked with risk high and also non-compliant. Since we apply this policy and it's turned on, let's take a look at what happens from an end user experience. If we look at Bob's device, Woodgrove VM1, and we try to access an application, in this case Salesforce, you're going to see that the user's prompted a message. Since the enterprise is looking at device compliance, and this device is definitely not compliant, the user does not have access to the resource. But what about those use cases when you want to give limited access? Let's take a look at Lisa. Lisa has a SharePoint site which is coming from an unmanaged device, and it's not joined to the domain. Lisa's still able to access her resources, like this PowerPoint, and she's still able to edit, but she's not able to download or print or sync. This is a form of giving a user a limited experience, but not completely blocking them. So you don't break collaboration, but you're still having more security around your information. So she's still able to collaborate with partners, but not having to download that information.
So now that we covered different ways IT admins can apply conditional access to weigh in compliance policies, let's take a look at connecting your applications. Because the only way to apply conditional access is to ensure that those applications exist within Azure AD. Now, when we talk about applications, we're not just talking about modern applications. Also, we're talking about those legacy applications. Any of those applications that do legacy authentications like Kerberos, NTLM, or forms-based. You can apply Azure AD App Proxy, so drop an agent on the server, to publish it with Azure AD App Proxy. What that enables IT admins to do is to protect those specific applications with conditional access. We've partnered with F5, Zscaler, and Citrix, and Alchemy to also help protect those applications with conditional access. So it's not just modern applications. We should also think about those different other applications and how we can protect them with conditional access. What about the applications that we don't know about? Shadow IT. How can you protect applications? Is by discovering them. Something that can help organizations to discover applications is Cloud App Discovery, which can help not only absorb network logs, but also leverage Microsoft Defender ATP to understand what applications are actually being used inside of your organization. Discovering applications is one step, but let's talk about actually integrating those applications.
Let's take a look at Cloud App Discovery's dashboard. Here you see a quick snapshot of the sanctioned and unsanctioned applications. A sanctioned application would be ones that we're okay with being in our organization. An unsanctioned one would be ones that we do not want our end users using. So this Discovered Apps blade tells you a quick snapshot of the amount of users that are actually using these applications. And you could also filter by applications that support SAML. So this gives you an idea of what applications could be integrated within Azure AD. And here we have Dropbox. So for this example, we're going to integrate Dropbox. And the way you would want to do that is if you go into Enterprise Applications and you click on New Applications, you're able to find thousands of applications that are ready to be integrated. All you have to do is search. In this case, we see Dropbox. And for Dropbox, we support two types of single sign-on modes: password-based single sign-on and SAML-based single sign-on. To save us some time, I've already done the basic SAML configuration here. And one of the things you'll notice is that we're trying to make it easier for IT admins to integrate and protect. So this experience is called One-Click SSO, and all it requires is a secure sign-in browser extension, which is already installed in this browser. If I click on Set up Dropbox for Business, you'll see that I'll get prompted to download a certificate. I download the cert and I click OK. It's going to take me to the admin console in Dropbox and ask me, am I okay to start setting up single sign-on? I'll click yes. And what's actually happening is the secure plugin is automatically filling in all the information needed. All I have to do is upload the cert. Once I upload the cert and click OK to save the changes, that's it. I've been able to configure single sign-on. So what the plugin's going to do is going to close the browser, and since we've been successfully able to set up single sign-on, let's go ahead and test. We can assign it as the current user to see if the current user has the correct permissions to access that application. And it looks like the user was able to successfully get single sign-on. Another benefit in integrating your application with Azure AD is that you can offer your end users a very customized experience where they actually access the applications that you integrated inside of Azure AD. Here you see Woodgrove Bank has a main dashboard that has several applications. These are applications that they want the majority of the bank to use. But here we have certain security operation centers or sales and marketing have specific applications that they want to use. You can customize all of this inside of the Enterprise Applications Blade, but let's go ahead and test our Dropbox to make sure that we have SSO. If I click on Dropbox, the icon, you'll see that I wasn't prompted for a password. We're trying to get away from passwords because passwords are a problem. And by offering end users a customized, better user experience where they don't have to maintain two sets of credentials, it's another less password that we have to worry about.
So let's talk about using least privilege. Identity governance gives you the capabilities of leveraging governance features like access reviews and access packages to ensure that your users are able to move with either job role changes or new user being onboarded. So it's not only important to understand your user life cycles from a new user perspective, but also about what happens when the user gets offboarded or a job role changes occurs. And one of the things that you can do is actually develop an access package to limit how much access that specific user has. You can use access packages to assign users to groups, applications, or specific roles. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at it here in the next couple slides. What about your admin accounts? We all know that the amount of admin privileges that get assigned to a specific user increase over time. What you can do is take advantage of privileged identity management. What privileged identity management does, it doesn't remove the role, but it introduces the concept of just-in-time access. So a user isn't removed from the role, but is only elevated to the role for a specific set number of time. For example, your global admin can only be a global admin for an hour just to do whatever they need to do. This not only reduces the attack surface, but this also, it forces the admins to prompt for MFA before they're able to elevate. Let's take a look at what entitlement management and session controls can do for your organization.
All right, let's first start off from the admin perspective. If we go to identity governance, you'll see that you can access entitlement management, access reviews, and privileged identity management from the Blade. First, let's take a look at access packages. Access packages can help your organization provide a specific package with groups, teams, apps, and SharePoint sites that you need to assign to users. So an example would be Woodgrove knows that they need to onboard specific users for this project called TNT. The resources that they've already integrated inside of Azure AD include AWS, an on-prem application, and some SharePoint sites that need specific roles to be assigned. Notice that there's also a role assignment for AWS, and that's because Woodgrove has already integrated AWS inside of their Azure Active Directory. This provides their user single sign-on to a specific application, but also allows the admins to apply controls like session controls to make sure that the users, once they get access, they still have to be monitored through a Cloud App Security. Our Microsoft Cloud App Security is our CASB solution. You can actually assign an access review for an access package, meaning that even though the user gets access to these specific resources, you can review access periodically. If we take a step back and understand what an access review actually is composed of, inside of the access reviews blade, you'll be able to see active, completed, and not started access reviews. If we click on new access reviews, you'll see the ability to create an access review that could be weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. So what this does is you can actually review guest users within a group or everybody within a specific group. You can even review access to a specific application. So if you have a specific application that most folks have access to, but you want to make sure that those users still need access to it. So a perfect example would be if your organization has a sensitive application and you want to review access every 6 months to make sure that the users that have access to the sensitive application need access and provide justification. You can actually create an access review to do this. If we look at privileged identity management, and we actually click on Azure Active Directory roles, you'll see that I've been assigned a specific role already. Now with privileged identity management, you can assign a role to a specific user that makes them eligible for that specific role. If I look at my eligible roles, it means that I have the ability to elevate myself to security admin. If I click on active roles, you'll see the roles that I currently have active, and my expired roles are the roles that have already been expired. But when I click on activate, I'll be requested to, before I get elevated inside of Azure Active Directory, I provide a justification reason, and actually I can adjust the time that I want to request access for. But an example would be if I only needed to be a security admin for half an hour, I could adjust it accordingly, provide justification reason, say I just need to go check something real quick, click on activate. If I didn't already provide MFA, specifically for admin roles, I would need to provide MFA before I get the actual role. So let's take a look at an example where Woodgrove has created an access package, but also leveraged privileged identity management and access reviews to make sure that the users that requested access to Project TNT will get reviewed access and have to elevate in PIM. If we take a look at how entitlement management can help organizations with job role changes, onboarding, offboardings with like access reviews, here's a perfect example. Lisa's boss has just assigned her as the project lead for Project TNT. Not only was she assigned as the project lead, but she's also supposed to be able to be onboarded to new applications. So what Lisa's boss already did was she's already grouped the applications, specifically AWS, need access as the new lead. Lisa's going to provide justification and be able to get access to these applications. So this is actually an access package. What Lisa didn't see was that this access package has already the permissions and the everything that she needs, but it's set to expire after 90 days. Since Project TNT in this organization is only good for 90 days, once 90 days is over, then the permissions expire. So if we go to My Apps, you'll see that DevOps is specifically created for Lisa's organization. Since she just requested access in access package, she should see the applications that she just requested access for. If we click on refresh, we should see the applications that she just requested access for. Notice how AWS was not on there. Neither was the sales dashboard. The sales dashboard is actually an application that's on-prem, and this has actually been published through Azure AD App Proxy. This is another approach that you can take when leveraging access packages to get access to your on-prem resources. But let's take a look at AWS. If the user goes straight to AWS, you'll notice that the user doesn't have access. So Lisa's been provisioned to AWS, but she doesn't have the correct access that she needs. If we look at what the manager said, was specifically she'll need to elevate in PIM first. And this is because Woodgrove is practicing least privilege. So if we go to PIM and understand what roles I've been assigned, Lisa as an end user has been assigned the role of an application developer. So Lisa will need to elevate. And what this elevation will do is grant her access to AWS. So she'll provide a justification reason. And this all gets logged, which is great for reporting and understanding who had a specific role at what time. But the user only has access for an hour. So what's actually happening in the backend is the user's going from a regular users with no roles to an application developer. Since Woodgrove has applications that are being hosted in different clouds, they want to make sure that the users are only accessing it when they need access. So in this case, their prod environment or an application that's being hosted elsewhere. So once Lisa elevates, her page refreshes. So what we used to get was you don't have access to this specific application. If we go back to the application and try to access it, you'll notice that she'll get single sign-on. But just because she got access to an application doesn't mean it makes it less secure. One of the things that you'll notice at the very top, you see CAS. This means our CASB solution is actually acting as a proxy. So our Cloud App Security is proxying this entire session. So if Lisa clicks continue, she'll get SSO straight to the application and she'll be able to carry on through her day. But since we want to make sure that Lisa understands that she should not be downloading or uploading any information, we've applied session controls. So Lisa may be new and not know exactly what the rules are about customer data, and she might accidentally try to download specific data that she shouldn't download. What sessions control allows you to do is to look for specific data. This could be social security or specific information that is classified as it's highly confidential to an organization. So session controls can also help organizations with uploading data. So if data is trying to leave an organization, if a user tries to upload data that's classified as company confidential, MCAS can also detect that as well, not only by based what's actually inside of the data, but whatever labels apply to that specific document.
So we viewed how managers can take advantage of assigning applications with our governance features like access packages, and also take advantage of controls like privileged identity management by assigning the user application roles, and also leverage session controls with our CASB solution to ensure users don't download data. So if we look at understanding how we can secure data, it comes in different shapes and sizes. So data comes through emails, documents, even applications. So SQL databases that those applications are accessing. Here are some ways that we can actually leverage to ensure that you're setting automatic data labeling applications to ensure that that data stays encrypted and that data stays safe either through transit or at rest. One of the controls that we just saw was so our CASB, our MCAS solution is able to proxy the session to ensure that if sensitive data, either through data labeling, like classification labeling through Microsoft Information Protection, you can prevent users from either downloading data or sending data that they shouldn't have. We've covered verifying explicitly, understanding how to use least privilege. Let's cover assume breach. Understanding that the amount of signals that we were talking about earlier come from different types of products, whether it be the Microsoft Threat Protection product or Azure Security Center, or even third-party partners. You need a centralized source of truth or a SIEM solution. One of the things that we're going to be looking at next is specifically Azure Sentinel. So how can you take the data that is happening within your organization and help your security team understand what's happening?
Now let's take a look at Azure Sentinel, our cloud-native SOAR and SIEM solution. You can see that in the overview blade, we already have those recent incidents that were caused by Lisa by trying to download or upload sensitive data. If we look at the Incidents tab, we're able to see that not only the upload and the download were logged through Cloud App Security, we can also investigate to get a better understanding of what other alerts Lisa may have caused. If we select the incident and hover over Lisa, we can get the other related alerts, and you can see the other alerts that the user has triggered. You also have the ability to create custom workbooks, go threat hunting, also connect specific products so you get all the information go into Azure Sentinel and you can leverage it. You could also create custom playbooks. So this actually is backed up by logic apps. So if you have specific actions that you want to take, like if you see a specific alert go off, you want a ServiceNow ticket to be filed, this is a great way to create a custom playbook. So that way, when you see an alert, you kick off another process.
So what we just saw was how we can leverage Azure Sentinel to consume all the data connectors, whether it be from Microsoft products or third-party products, so we can have an overview of what exactly is happening inside of our organization and use it for our security analytics. We've covered verifying explicitly using least privilege, assuming breach, verifying explicitly with understanding the user's identities, devices, and verifying that the user says who they say they are, and verifying that our devices are compliant and meet our needs, using least privilege access, even through access packages where we're able to provision users, but also apply privileged identity management to ensure that users only have access when they need access. This can also be applied to your global admins. Then assuming breach, by being able to bring it all together and all the signals that our products are producing and put it into a single source of truth, which would be your SIEM. So taking everything that we've covered from Microsoft AD to Azure ATP, which helps us understand what's happening on-prem, Microsoft Defender ATP, which is our endpoint detection and response, and our compliance or our mobile device management, which is Microsoft Intune, and putting that all together so we can help coordinate a compliance and policy engine like conditional access to ensure that our information stays protected with Microsoft Information Protection, or providing real-time session controls with Microsoft Cloud App Security. And leveraging all those signals and using the cloud native SIEM solution, which is Azure Sentinel, so that way our security teams have an overall view of what's happening throughout the enterprise. Using Azure AD conditional access, you can leverage different conditions to be met to either allow your users to grant access. So this could be either the user's sign-in risk or the user risk. If the user poses a high risk, then you can take actions to either block the end user. You could also do different things like limiting the user's access or even forcing password resets. This can all be weighed in through conditional access. So before a user even gets access to your resource, they have to go through these set of conditions. So let's talk about next steps. Some of the things that we recommend for your organization to do today is definitely turn on MFA for your users, and please start with your admins. Your admins have access to your crown jewels, so please protect them. Understanding your device is extremely important for an organization. Intune MDM can help you by giving you a device inventory once you enroll your devices inside of Intune. And then start integrating your applications. So it's not only about integrating applications, but using Cloud App Discovery can help you understand what applications are actually being used inside your organization. So remember, discover, integrate, and protect. Begin classifying and labeling your data. So you can use session controls with MCAS to ensure you catch data in session, but using Microsoft Information Protection helps you discover that data that's at rest. So any document that should be classified, and features like auto labeling help you automatically label and ensure that that data is encrypted. And then enforcing risk-based policies for applications. So one of the demos that you saw earlier was us blocking based on risk. So if a user poses a high risk, make sure they don't have access to those sensitive applications. And here are some resources I'm going to leave you with. Going passwordless today, go to aka.ms/go passwordless so you can understand how you can actually leverage passwordless options like Windows Hello for Business, FIDO keys, or the Authenticator app. We actually recently published the NIST Authenticator assurance levels with the Microsoft Identity Platform document. So if you're interested in where the Microsoft Identity Platform fits with the Authenticator assurance levels from NIST, definitely check out this white paper. Also, for Zero Trust, we do have some really great documentation that goes in depth at aka.ms/zero trust. Definitely recommend to review it. And then 5 steps to securing your identity infrastructure. If you go to aka.ms/5 steps, these 5 steps will make sure that you're able to secure your identity infrastructure from using Identity Secure Score and enabling extranet lockout. They're just really great steps, so definitely check them out. Thank you so much for attending today's session, and hopefully you found some of these resources helpful, and you can take some of the learnings or some of the demos that you saw today and implement them to help you achieve a secure state.